So, the costs are on target with plan. The new equipment's ready for installation. The schedule has been approved. Looks like you're ready to begin converting the system over to the new product line. I'd say you're off to a good start, Jessie. Well, how about you? Is the job what you expected it to be?
Well, yes. You know, I've worked hard for this promotion, and I'm really excited about being involved with this new product.
But it sounds to me like there's something else on your mind.
Well, it's just that I know I've got the technical skills to handle the work, but I'm a little surprised at how much of my time as a supervisor is spent dealing with people issues, you know, giving people instructions, helping people set priorities, giving people feedback about their performance.
Oh, yeah, I know. Handling people issues is a big part of a supervisor's job, and it's important. When you're working with powerful equipment and hazardous materials like we do here, people's lives can depend on how well they communicate with each other, how well they work together.
Oh, that's true, all right. I also know that as a supervisor, I'll have at least part of my performance judged on the basis of how good my interpersonal skills are.
I'll tell you what, you and I will be meeting every week for the next month or two about the new product startup. So if you've got any specific concerns about dealing with the people side of your job, just bring them up whenever we get together. I'll be glad to give you the benefit of my experience.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks, Frank. I don't know. There weren't any serious consequences this time, but it's got me concerned. Sometimes I think that maybe I'm not hearing what Dell's trying to tell me. Other times I feel like he isn't listening to what I'm telling him.
Well, you know what they say. We've got 2 ears, but only 1 mouth. That means we should spend twice as much time listening as talking.
Or maybe it means listening is twice as hard as talking.
Yeah, maybe. Either way, everybody's guilty of poor listening now and then. You know, people listen at different levels in different situations. The lowest level is self-focused listening, when you're more focused on your own interests than on what the other person is saying.
Well, that can be pretty frustrating for the person who's talking to you. I know when it happens to me, it makes me feel like I'm not being heard at all. I won't mention any names, but at another plant, I had a boss who did that to me a lot. I tried to talk with him about something I thought.
With that much water getting into the system, pretty soon product quality is going to be off spec.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
All right. In that case, then, it seems to me that the thing we ought to be doing here is...
No, he was definitely guilty of self-focused listening. As I said, it's the lowest level of listening, where you're more focused on your own interests than on what the other person is saying. But you know, Jessie, that problem that you were telling me about earlier, the one you had with Dell, that doesn't sound like it was just self-focused listening. What was his tone of voice? How about his body language?
I don't know. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, think about it now. What can you remember about it?
Well, I was talking with him about changing over...
So I think we'll try those, see how they work out, since we have to replace all those couplings anyway. Oh, listen, one more thing. Ed's running short-handed in Unit 3 today.
Yeah, I know how that goes myself.
Do we know anybody who can help out over there?
Well, I know Gene's worked in Unit 3 before, so he's familiar with their systems.
You're right, I'd forgotten that.
Well, Gene's a good hand, all right. I wouldn't be able to keep to this schedule without him. Speaking of which, I've got to get on with it.
Okay.
Dell, I thought you said you were going to send Gene over to help out Ed in Unit 3, but Ed called and said Gene never showed up.
Wait a minute, I told you already I'd like to help Ed out, but I'm short-handed myself.
But you specifically reminded me that Gene had experience in Unit 3, so he knew the systems over there.
All I meant was that Gene's the only person I could think of from the conversion crew who's familiar with how things work over in Unit 3, so he could help out. But I thought we were agreed that I need Gene here to keep us on schedule.
You know, that sounds like you were listening on the surface, not getting Dell's complete meaning. Listening on the surface is a step up from the self-focused level, but it can still cause serious problems.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you heard what Dell was saying, but you didn't pay attention to his unspoken signals. His tone of voice, body language, that kind of thing. So even though you heard his words, you didn't have a full understanding of what he really meant.
Oh, I get it. You're saying that hearing someone's words isn't the same as really listening.
Right? When you listen on the surface level, you focus only on the other person's words, and you ignore the unspoken signals that can give you important information about the real meaning behind the words. What you want to do as much as possible is active listening. It's the highest level of listening. When you listen on the active level, you listen to the other person's words, and you pay attention to his unspoken signals. You really need to do both of these things to make sure you're getting complete and accurate information.
I know the basics of what's involved in active listening, and I try to do it when I can, but you know how it goes.
I know, it takes some effort. But a big part of active listening is just working to understand the other person's point of view. A lot of the time, when people fail to do that, it's because of how they're thinking.
What do you mean?
It's easy to fall into mental habits that keep you from listening effectively.
For instance?
Well, when you get into the habit of only listening to the words and logic of what people say, you end up with the kind of problem that you had with Dell.
Yeah, I got that.
Now, the opposite extreme is to pay so much attention to a person's feelings that you miss the message. You ever do that?
Well, now that I think about it, yeah. I remember I had this boss.
Know-it-all college boy engineers. I tried to tell them, but would they listen to me? No. Now they're coming back to me, belly aching about downtime. You and Ben get out there and work on line B so we can at least have one line back in service today. I told them those seals wouldn't last, but no, they had to use them in every pump in the unit.
I was so focused on my boss being angry that I couldn't really hear what he was saying.
Yeah, that's just what I mean. Other bad mental habits are things like interrupting and faking, or pretending to listen while your mind is elsewhere.
And those are bad habits because you're focusing on your own thoughts, not what the other person is saying, right?
You got it. In certain situations, it's easy to fall into the habit of defensive listening. Well, say you think you're being criticized or judged. Well, then you're likely to start preparing a defense for yourself instead of paying attention to what the other person has to say.
Sounds like what you might do to get through a rough performance appraisal.
Yeah, a lot of people are guilty of that. A similar problem is the habit of only listening for points that you can disagree about or argue about. You might do that if you dislike the person who's talking.
Like when a design engineer comes down from his ivory tower and tries to tell the rest of us how to do things. You know, Frank, I think I got it right earlier. Listening is twice as hard as talking.
Well, you do have to work at it, especially when you're a supervisor. If you misinterpret something or don't get the complete meaning of what someone's telling you, you can create all kinds of problems for a lot of people, not just yourself.
Okay, I'll keep at that active listening. See you next week.
Yeah, we got the new pump installed, but we'll need about another hour to finish checking the alignment. Then we can get ready to test the pump without a load.
Sounds good.
Hey, it looks like you and Dell are communicating well enough now.
Yeah, well, I'm working on decoding those unspoken signals, but I'm no mind reader.
Hey, you don't have to be. You just need to be a good observer, the same way you are with the systems or equipment that you've been working with for years.
Yeah?
Well, yeah. Let's say you install a new pump in a system. When you bring that system back online, you don't just look at the readings on the gauges. You also listen to how the equipment sounds. You look for leaks. You watch for overheating or abnormal vibrations.
Right.
Well, with people, you just listen to their tone of voice. You watch their facial expressions, observe their body language, to make sure that you're getting the whole story the way that they intend for you to.
I never thought about it that way, but that makes sense. But what do you do if there's a mismatch between what somebody's saying to you and what their body language or their tone of voice is telling you?
Well, I'll let you in on something. For the most part, people are not conscious of their unspoken signals. And these kind of signals can be pretty hard to disguise. So when you have a mismatch between a person's words and his body language or his tone of voice, you generally can't go wrong by focusing on those unspoken signals. Of course, sometimes when you're seriously in doubt about a person's meaning, or if a miscommunication can put people's safety at risk, you really need to be more direct. You have to let them know that you're getting mixed signals and ask them to clear things up for you.
Can you give me an example?
Well, let's see. Well, yeah, I remember. Back when I was working with Ed in Unit 3.
Yeah, well, that's true. The whole unit will be offline, everything will be locked out and tagged, so I guess we could overhaul the compressor then too.
Well, now, you're saying we could do it, but you don't look like you think it's really such a good idea. What's your honest opinion?
Well, I thought Walt said that they were going to sandblast the tanks over there while the unit was offline. We can't have anyone working on the compressor with all that going on.
I didn't know anything about this. Will you get a hold of Walt and check it out?
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Decoding unspoken signals isn't mind reading, it's just paying attention to detail so I don't get into real trouble later on.
You got it.
Listen, do you have another minute or so to stop by my office to take a look at those schematics I was talking to you about?
Well, sure. Yeah, these look fine.
Great. Well, we're set on that. Listen, do you have time for one more listening question before you go?
Oh, sure. What is it?
Well, earlier you said it's hard to disguise body language, which is why it's such a good clue to what a person really means. But isn't it possible to consciously use body language to show people that you're really listening to them?
Well, sure. In fact, that's exactly what you should do. As a supervisor, you need to work on becoming aware of the messages that your body language and your tone of voice are sending. And if you have some awareness of these things, you can use them to help put people at ease when you're talking to them.
Great. I'll keep working on that. Well, I know you got to get going. Thanks a lot for coming by to look at these schematics. And thanks, too, for those other tips you gave me. I feel like I'm finally beginning to get the hang of this active listening business.
Good. I can tell you've been working on it, and I think you've come a long way. And hey, I'll be interested to see how this new pump checks out once you bring it online. Keep me posted?
Will do.
All right. So, is there anything else we need to go over?
No, I think you're pretty much up to speed on where we are, but if you've got a minute, I had something I'd like to get your input on.
Okay, what is it?
Well, I've really worked on active listening, and I feel like I'm getting better at that. But now, I'm wondering about the other side of the equation. How can I be sure that I'm responding in ways that will encourage the people on my crew to give me honest, complete information?
Well, first off, you're smart to be concerned. Even when you start out with open communication, if you don't respond in the right way to the information that people give you, pretty soon the communication process will break down. And when that happens, you're looking at a lot of frustration and inefficiency.
Downtime and safety concerns, too.
It sounds like you might have some experience with the problems that ineffective responses can cause. But you know, there are a lot of ways to respond, and no one way is always right. What's effective in one situation may not be effective in another. You have to choose the appropriate type of response for the specific situation. That's not an easy thing for some people to do.
Oh, you got that right. I had this boss who must have committed every type of ineffective response in the book. I used to dread having to talk to him. Sometimes he was very judgmental.
No, I'm telling you, you're wrong. That won't work with our equipment. Now, just stick with the procedure I showed you and don't go trying out any new stuff.
I hated that because I felt like he was treating me like a child, judging me and telling me what to do. Sometimes he'd start giving me advice, even though I wasn't asking for it. It went pretty well, but some of those nuts were rusted pretty tightly. So what I did was...
you know, the thing you want to do is use that new silicone spray we got, but don't ever use it with a torque.
All I wanted him to do was hear me out, not jump in with advice. That made me feel like he didn't think I was able to solve my own problems. Other times, he used a sort of one-upmanship.
You think you got a lot on your plate? Working a little overtime on short notice is nothing. I got to get this incident report out and have it on Mac's desk by 3, and I got to call the sales rep about those bad seals, and I still got to rework the turnaround schedule and get it out today.
That kind of response told me that he thought my problems were nothing compared to his, and I shouldn't be bothering him. He also used what I call the diagnosing response. So I'd really rather not do that.
Well, you don't want to do it because you're just afraid of taking on real responsibility. That's your problem.
I really resented that one. If I wanted someone to analyze my behavior, I'd go to a psychiatrist. Sometimes his responses would make me feel like he was interrogating me.
Like he was putting you on the spot?
I replaced that bucket trap in the line on D5. I'm heading over now to help Ben install the blinds to isolate the HPL unit.
And that new trap test out okay, and you let Jimmy know? And how long is it going to take you and Ben to finish with those blinds? Where's your respirator? You know you got to wear a respirator when you're installing the blinds, don't you?
I know you need to ask questions to get complete and accurate information, but when he grilled me like that, it made me want to clam up, not talk with him. Other times, he'd get on his soapbox and lecture.
Well, that may be so, but what you got to realize is that there's no room for error with these valves. They got to be kept in top condition, and all the parts got to be working according to strict specifications. They got a 200 psi popping pressure and 190 psi reseating pressure, so that's a blowdown of only 10 psi. If you get any less than 10 psi, you're going to have chattering, and if you get that...
He'd go on and on like he knew everything, and I had nothing worthwhile to contribute. A few times, he'd act like he was giving me helpful advice or being sympathetic.
And the readings have been on the high end of the range both times I've checked, so I was thinking we might want to take a closer look.
Don't worry about it. It's always been like that. Just as long as it's in the normal range, it'll be just fine. And you go on back and work with Ben over in the shop, okay?
Maybe he really did think he was being helpful, but it came across to me like he was saying that what I thought didn't count.
Sounds like quite a string of offenses.
Yeah, he was definitely guilty on multiple counts of ineffective responses. Give the devil his due, though. I did learn a lot from him about things I don't want to do now that I'm a supervisor myself. It's just that I'm not so sure what I should do.
Well, there is one thing that almost all those ineffective responses have in common.
Which is?
Which is, your boss was framing his responses strictly from his own point of view, without thinking about how you saw the issue.
So, if that made for ineffective responses, is the key to effective responses just showing that you understand the other person?
That's it in a nutshell. The fancy word for it is empathy, and the $20 term for this type of response is an empathic response. When you use an empathic or understanding response, you don't judge, you don't lecture, you don't give unsolicited advice. You just let the other person know that I heard what you said and I understand how you feel.
Well, that sounds like new territory to me. How do I get started?
Well, to let somebody know that you heard what he said, use paraphrasing or summarizing to restate what he told you. I saw you use paraphrasing with Dell just the other day. Do you remember?
We've been doing that every time we try to start up, and we keep replacing the solenoid, and it keeps burning out. So, I think we need to get Kenny over here to look things over. I'm guessing we got an electrical problem.
So we need Kenny to check out the electrical components before we can try another startup.
Yeah. It makes no sense.
That was paraphrasing. You'd use summarizing if you'd been talking for quite a while with somebody about a lot of different issues.
Right. You do that nearly every week when we talk about how things are going with the conversion.
Well, yeah, I guess I do. So, the costs are on target with plan. The new equipment's ready for installation. The schedule has been approved. Looks like you're ready to begin converting the system over to the new product line. I'd say you're off to a good start, Jesse.
So how about the rest of this empathic business? The part that says, I understand how you feel.
Okay, to do that, pay attention to the other person's body language, his tone of voice, that sort of thing. Then, show him in your response that you're aware of the unspoken part of what he's trying to communicate.
I think I'm going to need an example on this one.
Let me see. Okay, you remember back when you were working with Ed and me over in Unit 3?
Those new hires, they act like they never heard of hot work permits, lockout, tagout procedures.
If people don't take safety procedures seriously, it can really drive you up the wall. What do they do?
They don't follow the rules, and they make things dangerous.
Okay, I think I've got the idea.
Well, try it out this week and let me know how it works for you.
I'll do that. Thanks for blocking out some extra time for me, Frank. On top of everything else, I've got performance appraisals coming up soon. I'd like to pick your brain about how to give feedback without destroying morale.
Well, first off, let me get on my soapbox for a minute about feedback. To really do its job, feedback needs to be timely and specific, not just something that's dumped on people when performance appraisal time comes around. Think of how a control system uses continuous feedback to keep equipment running smoothly.
Okay, I get the picture. Timely and specific feedback gives everybody a sense of how things are going on the job from day to day. Then we can make adjustments to stay on track and make sure we've got a safe, productive workplace all the time.
Now, you also need to make sure that you use constructive feedback.
Meaning?
Well, meaning your goal is to use positive feedback to encourage desired behavior and negative feedback to discourage unwanted behavior.
So, you're saying that negative feedback can actually be constructive.
Exactly. You may not be aware of it, but I'm pretty sure you give constructive negative feedback on the job fairly often. Think about it.
Okay, let's see. You know, I did have that talk with Dell about the airline for the braking system. I asked him to come to my office Wednesday morning, so it was about 9:30. I had him take a seat. Thanks for coming by, Dell. I wanted to talk about the delay yesterday in getting the airline installed on the braking system. When you forgot about having to add a regulator to reduce the pressure on the line, that meant rework for us. And it held up Kenny's work on the control system.
Yeah, I know.
I understand that things can get pretty hectic when you're working on such a tight schedule. But if we get behind on this conversion, the new product won't go into production by the target date. Can you think of a way to help stop this problem from happening again? I get the feeling that I'm not communicating as clearly as I'd like to here. Is there something here that you don't understand?
I'm not sure what it is you want me to do.
I'd just like to hear what you think you could do differently on your end to help keep these delays and rework problems from being repeated.
Well, I could start using checklists again to make sure I've got all my parts and tools lined up before we start work. And I used to do that, but things got so busy, I guess I slacked off.
Checklists are a good idea. They really help when you have so many details to keep track of. Now, if you don't have time to keep the checklists yourself, you can always get Nancy to help you. That would give you more time. And it would also be a good way for her to learn on the job.
Okay, I can do that.
Good. I'm counting on you to head off these delays so we can stay on track.
You got it.
See, that was good, constructive feedback. You did a lot of right things.
Such as?
Well, you gave the feedback very soon after the problem came up, and you were specific. You were also careful to pick the right time and place to give feedback. Now, generally, giving negative feedback is not the best way to start off a day or a week. And you usually want to avoid giving negative feedback at quitting time or at the end of the week. And that way you don't send people home to brood about problems. You also want to give negative feedback in private, not in front of other employees.
So, timely, specific, and choose the right time and place. Good points.
Now, you also did a good job of paying attention to Dell's body language and checking to see that he understood you correctly. When you saw that he was confused, you took the initiative to clear things up.
Yeah, I have learned how important that can be.
Yeah, it wasn't a problem in your case, but something I'd like you to watch out for. Don't lay multiple criticisms on anybody. As much as possible, try to tackle just one problem at a time.
In other words, people can only handle so much negative feedback at one time.
You got it. Now, one of the best things you did was you encouraged Dell to use his problem-solving skills and work with you to turn things around.
Well, he's got a lot of experience. And I know we're going to need his skills to make this conversion work.
Now, there is one more thing I would suggest. Follow up the negative feedback session with positive feedback when he's corrected the problem.
Now, that's not the same as checking up on him to try and catch him when he's making the same mistake twice.
Oh, no, you don't want to do that. I'm just saying that when you see him doing something right, let him know.
So, what do you think is the most important thing about giving feedback?
I'd say probably the most important part of giving constructive feedback is making sure that it's not judgmental. It needs to be timely and specific, and it should describe the behavior, not pass judgment on that person. Now, that's true for positive feedback or praise, too, not just negative feedback.
Yeah, praise is definitely important. I had a boss who never praised anybody at all. Everybody got so down. It really made it hard for us to stay motivated.
Oh, you're right. If people don't get recognized for a job well done, they're going to interpret the lack of praise as negative feedback, and that's hard on morale. I think the key is to think of praise as just another type of positive feedback. Make it timely and specific.
Oh, it's a challenge, especially this people stuff. I have to be direct with people, but I have to be careful of their feelings. I have to give people feedback, but I shouldn't be judgmental.
And you need to ask for feedback. but not get defensive if somebody tells you something you might not agree with.
Now that's a tough one.
Oh, I know, but I'll tell you something. If you don't communicate openly about what you think, and you don't ask for feedback, you could be operating with a huge blind spot, and that can be dangerous for the people you work with as well as yourself.
Point taken. Oh, well, I better get going. Thanks again for your time.
Hey, no problem. I'll see you later.
You used to be such a good worker, and now you're sloppy and careless, and you've been like this for 3 months now. You better pay more attention to detail. Can I count on you to do better in the future? Look, I know things have been hectic in the last few days, but I really need you to slow down and fill out the daily logs legibly so I can read your handwriting. The information you record there is important, and I can't afford to guess about what you've written there. But it's frustrating for both of us when I have to track you down to clear things up. You know, if you just give the same attention to detail to the daily logs as you do to the rest of your work, I'm sure everything will be fine.
So, that should be the last of the modifications. And Bill has signed off on the extra money for upgrading the control system. Looks like we're on the home stretch now.
Yeah, and people are getting a little bit edgy from the long hours they've been putting in. I'll tell you, now is not the time I'd have chosen for doing performance appraisals, but I gotta start them next week. And frankly, I'm concerned about how to handle things if somebody's temper gets the best of them.
Well, that is a reasonable concern. People here work with powerful equipment and hazardous materials. You can't afford to let somebody who's emotional get out of control.
I know. But if somebody does overreact emotionally, what's the best way of handling the situation?
Well, I'm not sure there is any one best way. It depends on the situation. But I can tell you one thing that almost never works. Don't tell someone who's already lost it to calm down.
Huh. Well, that would normally be one of the first things I'd try, but now that I give it some thought, I see what you mean. If I'm really upset, I am in no mood to be told anything. Well, how about using a timeout, you know, saying something like, Joe, I think we both need a break so we can cool down and get our thoughts in order. Let's meet back here in half an hour.
Yeah, sometimes that's just what's needed. Another technique that often works is using active listening and empathic or understanding responses to get the situation under control.
You're talking about asking questions and giving the I understand how you feel type of response, right?
That's it. Every understanding response that you make to someone who's emotionally over the top encourages them to talk about the situation, and that bleeds off a little more of the emotion.
So eventually they calm down enough to deal with the situation logically. That's what you did when Ed got so upset about those new hires when we were working over in Unit 3. We were just talking about that the other day, remember?
I've had it. I can't take it anymore. They can just fire me. I am not working with those idiots. It's impossible.
Ed, what happened? It sounds like you're furious about something.
Those new hires, they act like they never heard of hot work permits, lockout, tagout procedures.
If people don't take safety procedures seriously, it can really drive you up the wall. What did they do?
They don't follow the rules, and they make things dangerous for the rest of us. I can't work like this.
I know. It's hard to focus on doing your job when you got to watch someone every minute. What do you think you should do about it?
I need to talk to Ron about it. Ron's in charge of making sure that all the new hires know what our safety procedures are before they're assigned to a unit.
Yeah, sounds like a situation he needs to know about, all right.
Yeah, if Ron knew that these new hires weren't following the safety rules, somebody would.
So, as I understand this technique, the key is to bleed off the emotional pressure little by little until you get it down to a reasonable level.
Yeah, that's the idea. And as a supervisor, you're the one who's got to take the initiative and do that. You can't control other people's emotions, but you are responsible for keeping their behavior from disrupting work or causing safety problems. You also want to remember that your own behavior sets an example for your crew to follow.
I try to keep that in mind. Even though I know you can learn a lot from a bad example, that's not really the way I want to go with my crew.
Wise decision. You know, having good people skills is basically a matter of demonstrating respect for other people. Show them that you listen to what they have to say, that you understand their viewpoints, that you value the work they do, and that you're interested in helping them develop their skills and improve their performance.
Sounds like a pretty tall order to me.
Well, it is, but you're up to the challenge.
Well, thanks for the vote of confidence. And thanks for all your help. I definitely feel better prepared for performance appraisals next week.
Well, good luck. And let me know how they go.
Oh, you know I will.
Know-it-all college boy engineers. I tried to tell them, but would they listen to me? No. Now they're coming back to me, belly aching about downtime. I told them those seals wouldn't last, but no, they had to use them in every pump in the unit.
With that much water getting into the system, pretty soon product quality is going to be off spec.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm listening.
All right. In that case, then, it seems to me that the thing we ought to be doing here is to keep the water out of the system.
Yeah, well, that may be so, but what you got to realize is that there's no room for error with these valves. They got to be kept in top condition, and all the parts got to be working according to strict specifications. They got a 200 psi popping pressure and 190 psi reseating pressure, so that's a blowdown of only 10 psi. If you get any less than 10 psi, you're going to have chat.
I'd like to see you do any better. You're not down there on the line. You don't have a clue about what I do day in and day out to meet your almighty schedule.
Del, I think we need to take a break here and cool down and think things through. Let's meet back here in half an hour.
No, I'm telling you, you're wrong. That won't work with our equipment. Now, just stick with the procedure I showed you and don't go trying out any new stuff.
Those new hires, they act like they never heard of hot work permits, lockout, tagout procedures.
If people don't take safety procedures seriously, it can really drive you up the wall. What did they do?